John's day had been a relentless slog. As an accountant, he spent hours hunched over spreadsheets, his eyes burning from the glare of the screen and his back stiff from sitting too long. Fridays were his lifeline, a promise of rest and time with his son, Timmy. He pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home, the sight of its beige siding and neatly trimmed lawn easing the tension in his shoulders. But as he stepped out of the car, the evening's calm shattered. Angry voices sliced through the air, coming from the front porch. Frowning, John slung his briefcase over his shoulder and hurried toward the sound. As he rounded the corner, his stomach dropped. Two men stood on the porch, looming over Timmy, who sat in his wheelchair. Their uniforms were a poor imitation of authority, wrinkled shirts stretched too tight across their frames, pants that didn't match, and badges that looked like they'd been plucked from a dollar store bin. The taller one had a twitchy mustache and a lanky build, while the shorter one was stocky, his bald head gleaming under the porch light. They were berating Timmy, their voices sharp and accusing.
"This ramp is a violation,"
the taller man barked, jabbing a finger at the wheelchair ramp that led to the front door. It's not the right shade of beige. Clashes with the neighborhood aesthetic. You need to remove it immediately or pay a fine. Timmy's hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, his knuckles white. At 12 years old, with cerebral palsy limiting his mobility, he was a bright kid who wore his challenges with a quiet resilience. But now his voice trembled, barely audible over the men's bluster. "But I need it to get inside. I can't walk without it." The shorter man scoffed, folding his arms with a smirk. "That's not our problem, kid. Rules are rules. If you can't follow them, maybe this isn't the right place for you." John's blood surged, a hot wave of fury rising in his chest. How dare they speak to his son like that? Timmy was vulnerable. His wheelchair was his lifeline, the ramp his gateway to the world. John had built it himself with help from his friend Mike, ensuring it was sturdy and safe. Painted to match the house's trim, it was a practical necessity, not some decorative afterthought. He dropped his briefcase and marched forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a whip. "Excuse me, what the hell is going on here?" The two men turned, momentarily startled. The taller one recovered quickly, puffing out his chest. "Are you the homeowner? We're with the HOA. This ramp violates several regulations." John's eyes narrowed as he stepped onto the porch, positioning himself between Timmy and the intruders. "What regulations?" "This ramp is for my son's accessibility. It's not some optional feature." The shorter man pulled out a clipboard, flipping through papers with exaggerated importance. "According to Section 14, Paragraph 2 of the bylaws, all exterior modifications must be approved by the HOA board. This ramp doesn't meet color standards, and it's an eyesore. You should have submitted a request." John's jaw tightened. He was a hard-working father, raising Timmy alone since his wife passed 3 years ago. He prided himself on keeping up with the neighborhood's nitpicky HOA rules, mowing the lawn to the exact height, repainting the mailbox when it faded. But this was absurd. "I don't recall any rule about wheelchair ramps needing approval, and I didn't get notice of any color restrictions." The taller man waved a hand dismissively. "It's in the bylaws. You should have read them. Now, you've got two options: tear it down or pay a $500 fine to cover the violation." $500. John's voice rose, incredulous.
"That's insane."
"This ramp isn't hurting anyone. It's keeping my son safe." Timmy's eyes glistened. "Dad, I didn't mean to cause trouble." John knelt, his hand on Timmy's shoulder. "You didn't, buddy. This isn't your fault." Standing, he glared. "You're not getting a dime." The shorter man sneered, stepping closer. "Then we'll escalate. You'll regret this." A deep voice cut through. "What's the problem here?" Mike emerged from the backyard, wiping his hands. He'd come to help set up a grill for a weekend barbecue, a casual hangout turned tense. At 6'4", with an MMA honed physique, Mike was imposing yet warm, his grin fading as he took in the scene. He'd met John at the gym, teaching him not just punches but confidence after Sarah's death. Now, his presence shifted the air. The imposters faltered, sizing him up. The taller one held his ground. This ramp's against the rules. Mike crossed his arms, biceps flexing. What rules? The shorter man stammered, clipboard shaking. Section 12, paragraph 3. Colors not approved. Mike's eyebrow rose, a smirk tugging his lips. Section 12, paragraph 3. I've read the bylaws with John. No mention of ramp colors. You sure about that? The taller man's voice grew loud. New amendment. Passed last week. John shook his head. I'm on the HOA email list. No amendments. The men exchanged a nervous glance. Maybe we can let this slide, the taller one said. Pay $500, and we'll call it even. John's suspicion hardened. This isn't about rules, it's extortion. Mike nodded, eyes locked on them. And the real HOA wouldn't like you shaking down residents. He turned to John. Call them. The shorter man paled. No need to escalate. We can work this out. Mike stepped forward, calm but menacing. I think it is. You're not going anywhere till we sort this. The taller man backpedaled. Maybe we got the wrong house. Mike's smile was cold. You picked the wrong house, but not for that reason. John dialed the HOA, his thumb steady despite his racing pulse. As the phone rang, his mind drifted to their life here, carved from routine and resilience. Timmy's days were a battle. Physical therapy, schoolkids who didn't always get him. But home was his haven. John had become both parents, helping Timmy dress, eat, get to school, all while crunching numbers as an accountant. The ramp, built with Mike's help, was Timmy's freedom, letting him roll out to sketch on the porch or chase the ice cream truck. Its beige paint matched the house, a practical necessity, not a decoration. Willow Creek was the kind of neighborhood where every house looked like it had been stamped from the same mold. Beige or gray siding, manicured lawns, mailboxes in approved shades of navy or black. The HOA governed it all with a rule book thicker than a dictionary. John had learned early on to comply, not out of love for conformity but to avoid trouble. He'd replaced a porch light when it was deemed too yellow, and paid a fine for letting the grass grow a half-inch too long during a rainy week. Each incident left a bitter taste, but he'd shrugged it off, telling himself it was the price of a safe place for Timmy. Safe until now. As John stood there, the imposter's words echoed in his mind, rules are rules. He'd heard that phrase too often from the real HOA, and it grated now, twisted by these frauds. He glanced at Mike, who leaned casually against the porch railing, his eyes locked on the fake cops like a hawk tracking prey. Mike's presence was a lifeline, a reminder that John wasn't alone in this fight. Mike had been a game changer for John. They'd met at the local gym, where John, feeling lost after Sarah's death, signed up for MMA classes to burn off his grief. Mike, the coach, saw past John's clumsy punches to the pain underneath. Over months, he taught John not just how to jab and grapple, but how to rebuild confidence. Their friendship grew beyond the gym. Mike became a regular at the house, tossing a football with Timmy or helping with odd jobs. Tonight he'd come over to set up a new grill, planning a weekend barbecue to lift everyone's spirits. Instead, he'd walked into this mess. John's thoughts snapped back to the present as the taller imposter cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. Look, sir, let's not make this complicated. Pay the fine and we'll leave. Mike chuckled, low and dangerous. You're not leaving until we sort out who you really are. The shorter man's clipboard slipped slightly in his sweaty grip. We're HOA officials. Check the bylaws yourself. John shook his head, his suspicion hardening. I will. But first I'm calling the real HOA. He hit the contact, the phone ringing loudly in the tense silence. As they waited, John's mind wandered to rumors he'd heard at the last neighborhood watch meeting. Someone had mentioned fake HOA officials hitting nearby communities, scamming people with threats of fines for made-up violations. The stories sounded like urban legends, crooks posing as authority figures, preying on folks too busy or trusting to question them. John had dismissed it as gossip, something that happened to other people, not in Willow Creek's manicured bubble. Now, staring at these two, he kicked himself for not paying closer attention. Timmy's voice broke through, small but steady. "Dad, are they lying?" John knelt, voice calm. "I think so, buddy. We'll figure it out." Timmy nodded, hands less tense. John hated his fear. Home was supposed to be safe, not a place for bullies in fake uniforms. He thought of other neighbors, maybe less equipped to fight back, targeted by these frauds. The rumors mentioned elderly residents, single parents, people like him, but without a mic. The sirens wailed closer and the imposters' panic grew. They'd expected an easy mark, a disabled kid, a tired dad. Instead, they'd found a father who wouldn't bend and a friend who wouldn't blink. Mike clapped John's shoulder, voice low. "You're doing good, man. We've got this." John nodded, grateful for Mike's anchor. The porch was a battlefield, but they weren't alone. Whatever came next, police, truth, justice, they'd face it together for Timmy, for their home. The air on the porch was thick with unease as John pocketed his phone. The 911 operator's assurance that police were en route ringing in his ears. The two imposters stood frozen under Mike's steely gaze, their earlier swagger reduced to nervous twitches. The taller one's mustache quivered as he adjusted his ill-fitting uniform, while the shorter one clutched his clipboard like a shield, his bald head glistening with sweat. Timmy sat in his wheelchair, his hands no longer gripping the armrests quite so tightly, bolstered by his dad's resolve and Mike's looming presence. John's heart still pounded, but a grim determination settled over him. These frauds had picked the wrong house. The confrontation had begun just minutes earlier, though it felt like hours. John had been pulling into the driveway, weary from a long day, when he'd heard the raised voices. By the time he reached the porch, the fake cops were already deep into their act, berating Timmy over the wheelchair ramp. Now, with the truth laid bare by the HOA's confirmation that no inspectors were sent, the imposter's scam was crumbling. And they knew it. It started when they'd rolled up in an unmarked sedan, parking crookedly across two spaces like they owned the street. John hadn't seen their arrival, but Timmy had been on the porch, sketching in his notebook, when the men approached. They'd strode up with practiced confidence, their uniforms a clumsy patchwork of authority, shirts too tight, pants too short, badges that didn't quite catch the light right. The taller one, who introduced himself as Officer Daniels, had zeroed in on the ramp, his voice dripping with disdain. "This structure's a violation," he'd declared, gesturing at the ramp as if it were a blight on the neighborhood. "The color's off. Doesn't match the approved palette. It's an eyesore, and it's gotta go." Timmy had blinked up at him, confused. "But it's for my wheelchair. I need it to get inside." Reed, stocky and bald, had snorted. "Doesn't matter. Rules are rules. Should have gotten approval. Now it's a $500 fine payable now or we escalate." Timmy's pencil had dropped, his voice faltering. $500? I don't have that. Glancing toward the house, hoping for his dad, he'd found only the men's looming shadows. "Pay up, or we'll file a lion." Daniels had pressed, leaning closer. "You don't want to lose your home over a ramp, do you?" That's when John had arrived, catching their threats. Now, with the HOA confirming no inspectors were sent, he stood between Timmy and the frauds, fury burning. The ramp was Timmy's independence, built with Mike's help, painted to blend with their beige home. To attack it was to attack his son. "You're not getting a cent," John said, voice low, "and you're not touching that ramp." Daniels tried to laugh, but it cracked. "We're just doing our job. The bylaws, no bylaws about ramp colors," John snapped. "I checked. You're not OA." Reed's clipboard trembled. "A mix-up. We're new hires. Maybe the office." "Save it." Mike cut in, his voice a calm rumble. He'd been quiet, letting John's call expose the lie, but now he stepped forward, his 6'4" frame casting a shadow. "You're not HOA. You're not even good liars." The men flinched, eyes darting. John pressed. "Police are coming. They'll want your IDs, your credentials. Everything you don't have." Daniel's tone turned wheedling. "No need for cops. Maybe we settle this quietly. $200 and we're gone." John's jaw dropped. "You're still scamming. Now it's 200. Timmy let out a nervous laugh, easing the tension briefly. John caught his son's eye, relieved to see his spirit flicker. But Reed's face reddened, his finger jabbing at John. "You're making a mistake. You don't know who you're dealing with." Mike slid between them, stance relaxed but ready. "Oh, we've got an idea. Couple of con artists who thought they could bully a kid and his dad. Bad call." Timmy's voice piped up, clear despite the strain. "Why are you lying about the ramp? It's not hurting anybody." Daniels muttered about standards, but Reed's temper flared. "Kid, stay out of this. Grown-up business." John's fists clenched. "Don't talk to my son like that." Mike's hand hovered near Reed, making him flinch. "You heard him. Back off." The standoff tightened, sirens growing louder. John's mind raced. Rumors of fake officials scamming neighbors, targeting the vulnerable, weren't just gossip. Willow Creek's strict HOA made it a perfect mark. These men weren't just after money. They banked on fear, on Timmy's disability, on John's exhaustion. He glanced at his son, now watching Mike like a superhero, and gratitude for his friend surged. Mike leaned in, voice low. "So, which one of you wants to explain section 12 paragraph 3 again? I'm all ears." Daniel stammered, hands fumbling. "We told you new amendment." "Wrong," Mike said, pinning Daniels against the railing with a step. "HOA doesn't have ramp color rules. What's your real game?" Reed tried, voice shaky. "Wrong address maybe." Mike's smirk sharpened. "Wrong story. Wrong day to mess with my friends." He eyed Reed's badge. "That says OA security. HOA doesn't have security." "What is that?" "A laminated library card." John snorted, showing Timmy the clipboard. "Their bylaws are a takeout menu with scribbles." Timmy giggled, the sound bright. Mike's humor was surgical, exposing the fraud's flimsy act. "You guys rehearse this in a mirror or wing it," he quipped. Daniels bristled, voice cracking. "You can't talk to us like that. You've got a scared kid and a dad ready to tear you apart." Mike shot back, eyes narrowing. "That's what you've got." Timmy lifted his chin, bolstered. John's pride swelled. His son was tough, disability or not. But the tension spiked as Reed's fists balled, stepping toward Mike. "Back off, tough guy. You don't want trouble." Mike didn't flinch. "Trouble's here. You brought it." John moved closer to Timmy, ready to shield him. Reed shoved Mike's chest, a clumsy grab for control. Mike's response was instant. His hand caught Reed's wrist, twisting it into an arm lock with precise pressure. Reed yelped, pinned. "Easy," Mike said calm. "Don't make this worse." Daniels lunged to help, but Mike sidestepped, tripping him. Daniels flailed, landing face, first in the azalea bush petals scattering, his badge dangling comically. Timmy burst out laughing and John grinned despite his racing heart. Mike hadn't thrown a punch, just neutralized them with flair. "Nice bush," Mike quipped. "Matches your vibe, prickly and fake." John marveled at Mike's ease, keeping things light while holding ground. "You okay, buddy?" he asked Timmy. "Yeah," Timmy said, eyes on Mike. "He's got this." Sirens roared, now a cruiser pulling up. John waved the officers over. "Thanks for coming. These guys are pretending to be HOA, scamming us over my son's ramp." Sergeant Lopez, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, nodded. "We got your call." "IDs." Daniels and Reed froze. "In the car," Reed muttered. "Sure," Mike said, releasing him toward the officers. "Go get it." The second officer, younger. "No logos, no official plates." "Explain that." Lopez turned to John. "Walk me through it." John recounted the absurdity. The ramps, wrong color. The 500 fine dropping to 200. The the takeout menu bylaws. He handed over the clipboard, and Lopez's lips twitched. Creative. She glared at the imposters. You've been busy, haven't you? The younger officer returned, holding papers and a badge. More of these, a whole kit. Lopez's expression hardened. We've had reports across 3 counties, targeting disabled folks, elderly, people who might not push back. Wrong house this time. John's stomach twisted. The rumors were real, and these men were worse than he'd thought. As the officers cuffed Daniels and Reed, Mike clapped John's back. Told you we had this. John's laugh was shaky. You made it look easy. Lopez paused, turning back. There's more to know about these 2. It's bigger than you think. John's breath caught, the words a cliffhanger. Whatever came next, they'd face it together for Timmy, for justice. The police cruiser's red and blue lights pulsed across the front yard, painting Willow Creek's manicured lawns in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding on John's porch. The 2 imposters, Officer Daniels and Officer Reed, stood cuffed beside the cruiser, their fake badges confiscated, their heads bowed under the weight of their failed scam. John's grip on Timmy's wheelchair was steady, grounding him as the lead officer's words echoed in his mind. It's bigger than you think. Mike leaned against the porch railing, his calm demeanor unshaken, but his eyes flicked to the officer, awaiting the bombshell she'd promised. The lead officer, Sergeant Lopez, adjusted her notepad, her sharp gaze softening as she addressed John. You did the right thing calling us. These 2 aren't just small-time hustlers. They're part of a ring hitting vulnerable folks across the region. John's jaw tightened. Vulnerable folks. Lopez nodded, glancing at Timmy, who sat straighter in his wheelchair, listening intently. People with disabilities, seniors, single parents, anyone they think won't fight back. They pose as HOA officials, code inspectors, even utility workers. Demand cash for fake violations, banking on fear or confusion. We've been chasing them for weeks. Timmy's brow furrowed, his voice small but clear. Why would they pick on people like that? John's heart ached at the question, but Lopez answered with a gentleness that cut through the evening's tension. Because they're cowards, kid. They go after people they think are easy targets. But they didn't count on you, your dad, or your friend here. She nodded at Mike, who flashed Timmy a quick grin. Mike pushed off the railing, his tone light but pointed. Yeah, they didn't do their homework. Timmy's tougher than both of them combined. Timmy's cheeks flushed, a shy smile breaking through. John squeezed his shoulder, pride swelling despite the anger simmering beneath. The idea that these men had targeted his son, not just for money, but because they saw his disability as a weakness, made his blood boil. He thought back to the rumors he'd dismissed, the stories of scams in nearby towns. If he'd listened, maybe he'd have been more prepared. But regret wouldn't undo this. It was time to focus on what came next. Lopez gestured to the cruiser, where the younger officer was cataloging evidence from the imposter's sedan. We found a ledger in their car. Names, addresses, amounts they've scammed. Your call tonight might have just cracked this wide open. John's eyes widened. How many people? Dozens at least, Lopez said, her voice grim. Thousands of dollars. They hit neighborhoods like this one. Places with strict HOAs. Because the rules make their threats believable. That ramp of yours, they've used similar lines on wheelchair lifts, garden fences, even kids' treehouses. Mike let out a low whistle. Treehouses. These guys are desperate. Desperate and dumb. Lopez agreed, a wry smile tugging at her lips. But you stopped them cold. That arm lock you pulled. She nodded at Mike. Textbook. You a cop in another life. Nah, Mike said, chuckling. Just a guy who spends too much time in the gym. Couldn't let these clowns scare my friends. John managed a half smile, grateful for Mike's knack for diffusing tension. He glanced at Timmy, who was watching the officers with a mix of curiosity and resolve. The boy had been terrified when the imposters first cornered him, but now he seemed different, stronger. Like Mike's courage had rubbed off. Lopez flipped her notepad shut. "We'll need statements from all of you, but it's a slam dunk case. The ledger, their fake IDs, your testimony. It's enough to put them away for a while. Plus, we're coordinating with other precincts to track down their accomplices." "What happens now?" John asked, his voice steady but laced with exhaustion. "They'll be booked tonight," Lopez said. "You'll hear from us about court dates, but honestly, you've done the hard part. The HOA's been notified, too. They're sending out an alert to the neighborhood." John's eyebrows shot up. "The HOA's actually doing something useful." Lopez laughed, a short, knowing sound. "First time for everything. They're spooked. Don't want their name tied to scams. Expect an email about vigilance and community safety by morning." As the officers led Daniels and Reed into the cruiser, John felt the weight of the day begin to lift. The imposter's sedan was towed away, its trunk stuffed with more fake documents and badges, a pathetic arsenal of deceit. Neighbors had started to peek out, drawn by the flashing lights, their whispers a soft hum in the background. John ignored them, focusing on Timmy, who was now chatting with Mike about the arm lock. "You think I could learn that move?" Timmy asked, his eyes bright. Mike crouched beside him, grinning. "Kid, with your smarts, you'd be flipping guys like that in no time. We'll start with something simple at the gym, yeah?" Timmy nodded eagerly, and John's chest warmed. Mike had a way of making Timmy feel unstoppable, disability or not. It was a gift John hadn't realized he'd needed until tonight. A reminder that his son could face the world with strength, not just survive it. As the cruiser pulled away, Lopez lingered, handing John her card. "If you think of anything else, give me a call. And keep that ramp. It's perfect. Thanks," John said, pocketing the card. "For everything." She nodded and headed to her car, leaving the porch quiet at last. The crickets had resumed their chorus, and the streetlights buzzed softly, casting a warm glow over the house. John sank onto the porch steps, suddenly feeling every ounce of the day's strain. Mike joined him, stretching his legs out, while Timmy rolled closer, his sketchbook back in his lap. "You okay, buddy?" John asked, studying his son's face. "Yeah," Timmy said, his voice firm. "I was scared at first, but you and Mike didn't let them win. That's what matters, right?" John swallowed hard, nodding. "Right." Mike nudged John's shoulder. "Kid's got it figured out. You raised him good." John looked at Timmy, sketching again, his pencil moving with a new confidence. Tonight had shaken them, but it had also shown Timmy he wasn't helpless. Mike's quick thinking, his calm under pressure, had turned a threat into a lesson, one John hoped Timmy would carry forever. The HOA's email arrived later that night, just as Lopez predicted. It was a long-winded notice about unauthorized individuals and resident vigilance, with a promise to review security protocols. John read it aloud to Mike and Timmy over pizza, his tone dripping with mock reverence. "And listen to this, we may consider regulating external interactions to prevent future incidents." Mike snorted, grabbing another slice. "What's that mean? They gonna fine us for talking to strangers now?" Timmy giggled, sauce on his chin. "Or make a rule about fake cop encounters?" John laughed, the sound loosening the last knot in his chest. "Knowing them, they'll try. Next meeting, they'll probably debate the approved font for scam warnings." As they ate, John reflected on the night's deeper impact. He'd always seen himself as Timmy's protector, but tonight, Mike had reminded him of the power of friends who show up when it counts. And Timmy. He'd faced fear and come out stronger, inspired by Mike's courage and John's refusal to back down. The ramp, still standing proudly, wasn't just access to their home. It was a symbol of their resilience. The pizza box emptied, and Timmy yawned, his eyelids drooping. John wheeled him inside, the house feeling safer now, reclaimed from the imposter's shadow. As he tucked Timmy in, his son murmured, "Thanks, Dad, for keeping me safe." "Always," John said, kissing his forehead. Back on the porch, Mike was waiting with 2 beers, the night settling around them. "To friends who fight back," Mike said, clinking his bottle against John's. John smiled, the toast sealing the night. "And to HOAs that might, just might, learn to chill." They laughed, the sound carrying into the quiet street, where Willow Creek slept on, a little wiser, a little stronger.